emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 122.LV1933. Certificate number 33734. Billy Jack.
We got the law here, Billy Jack. When policemen break the law, then there isn't any law. Just a fight for survival.
If someone is listening to this in, say, the year 2050, John.
2050.
Civilization has not fallen.
We'll be alive in 2050, hopefully, right?
One would hope.
Sure.
Here's my question. Are movie theaters alive? Does a movie theater exist if someone's listening to this in 2050? Or do we have to explain movie theaters?
So we know movie theaters were real big business from the 20s through the 50s, and then everybody was afraid television was going to ruin them. And so then they invented CinemaScope or whatever to get people in the theater.
3D, we talked about smell-o-vision. There's been basically 70 years of movie theater fear that they're going away.
And then in the 70s, there was the resurgence of young Hollywood that was getting people back in the theaters.
It's coming up on this show.
And then the 80s, we all went to the movies in the 80s, but then what happened? It was Blockbuster Video and all that was supposed to ruin movie theaters again.
They survived home video probably because of the gap, right? There's, movies would...
There's a home video gap.
Movies would play in theaters and you'd want to see what everybody was talking about. You did not want to wait until, 2 or 3 months later when they showed on the rental shelves, and then they wouldn't be available for sale well into the 90s. They wouldn't be available for sale for another 3 to 6 months after that.
Right, long way. And then they were expensive. But then streaming, oh boy, that's just ruined the movies.
Final nail in the coffin? I mean, the movie theaters were always wary of streaming, which immediately killed off video stores in like an hour and a half. It was like Omicron ending Delta. Like streaming was so much more virulent than having to go to Blockbuster that people were immediately like, oh, perfect. I'll just press this button.
Streaming definitely ruined the entire indie rock music business.
Because
there's a whole generation that doesn't think music should cost money.
Oh, right. You're just talking about everything post Napster.
Yeah, I don't mean streaming movies. If anything, that might help.
You mean pirating? You're Metallica right now.
Well, no,
you're mad.
The whole. Spotify, like it's pretty well documented that we get paid 0.00002%, 2 cents per song.
And you'll like it.
You will like it. You'll be happy with your $75 check, my friend.
I just found out Amazon is actually the good one.
Yeah.
Because they pay 0.002 instead of 0.0002 cents. They pay you 10 times as much.
It's crazy how great it is to get 0.002 cents.
That's why we did that entry about the mill. So you could understand your royalty checks. Right. Like the thousandth of a dollar is very relevant to an indie rocker.
But when was the last time you went into a movie theater and bought a tub of popcorn and watched a movie?
No, twice a week.
Yeah, and I went to one.
I was going to ask
3 days ago.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say before the pandemic.
No.
Because you're not a huge theater goer.
No, but I enjoy going to the movies, and throughout the pandemic, I went to the movies because there was no one in the theaters.
Me too. You could just wear an N95 and it was empty and you're like, this is 100 times safer than Safeway.
It was awesome. In the early, mid-2000s, I guess, they built that, the Landing Mall in Renton.
Yeah.
And they built it right before the economic collapse, 2007.
perfect time to build a mall.
It was amazing. And so and it was one of those like outdoor malls. And then they kind of built to look like a little old main street town.
Like there's a P.F. Chang's, but it's not connected to J.C. Penney's. There's a little walkway in between.
You get out and walk. So all of the places were empty. They were just, they all had paper in the windows that were like, coming soon, a thing that's not coming soon.
Like it's some generic picture of a women's clothing store.
Yeah, or like two people being very happy.
It's so sad.
And so from 2008 to like I have to say 14, there was nothing there except a movie theater, and there was no one in the movie theater. And I treated it like it was my private screening room and went all the time because, why wouldn't you? And that was how it felt in the pandemic. So I just went to see the Batman.
I assumed so.
Yeah, went to see the Batman and ate 2 large tubs of popcorn.
It's a 3-hour movie. You got to.
It's a 3-hour movie that if it were a 2-hour movie would be 100% better. I don't know how to do that math.
You don't like the, I knew it was going to be a 3-hour movie and I kind of had to pee already.
Yeah.
And then
I peed twice.
And then it kind of feels like it's winding down and I look at my phone and I'm like, oh, this is one of those movies that has a surprise hour third act. And there is. And I didn't mind it, but my bladder did.
Well, it's just all the times when Batman gives some long soliloquy about I don't know how things, I don't even remember the soliloquies. He just talks for 5 minutes about justice or revenge or something. And it's like, get on with it.
This has little to do with Billy Jack, but I did like it. I like that he's a detective. He's like, he spends the whole movie just like kind of Nicholson in Chinatown, just showing up at crime scenes and opening drawers and stuff.
And he's like, oh, I can solve this riddle. But yeah, I read all the reviews that were like, this one's not blah, blah, blah. And I realized, movie reviewers are also really struggling right now because these reviews are irrelevant. It's a good movie.
I think you're trying to get a hot take now if you're a reviewer of anything.
Yeah.
Because there's no safe print industry jobs anymore.
Yeah.
It's all an economy of clicks, just like anything else.
I stay off the internet as best I can, but
but Batman Reviews is the one time.
Well, because I'm following the war in Ukraine, then I'm there, right? And there's all this clickbait. And of course, anything that says Ken Jennings in it, I click on. And
was I in the Batman review?
No, the clickbait around you is so hilarious. It's like, will Ken Jennings survive? And then you click on it, and it's just a regurgitated, like...
You were hoping I'd be in a tank full of fire ants.
I was like, will Ken Jennings survive? I saw him 2 days ago. What happened? And then it's like, oh, Mayim Blamick. No, what's her name? Mayim. No.
Yeah.
Mayim. Blanick.
Manola Blahnik? Do you think Manola Blahnik's hosting Jeopardy?
Blam. Mayim Blam.
There's an hour left in the show, and it's going to be all John trying to say Mayim Bialik.
Bialik, right. And it talks about, it says in the headline, like, Mayim Bialik, big news. And I go, and it's like, she wants to do Jeopardy. And it's like, she's doing Jeopardy. And also, yeah, of course she does. That's not news.
But this happens to me. They know Jeopardy as clicks now. So even if I tweet, I've just got revisions back on my new book, that goodhousekeeping.com will have like, Ken Jennings reveals new project.
Yeah, or Ken Jennings revisionism. You're like, what is there really? Anyway, so I'm clicking on stuff, and then the Batman reviews. I like a good movie review, or I used to. But yeah, it's like full
I had all of Ebert's paperbacks when I was a young person.
I did too, and I read, you don't remember, I'm sure, but there was a zine in the late 80s, early 90s. I think it was published in Portland. It was called Snipe Hunt. And it was a proper newspaper, like the Stranger or the Seattle Weekly, like a weekly paper.
It looked like a little weekly,
but it was all record reviews.
Oh wow!
And they were the best. They were all capsule reviews, and they were the best. They were so snarky. They made like old Q magazine seem like Good Housekeeping. And I would just read records I had no intention of ever listening to, but I would just read these reviews and bask in them. So I read the Batman reviews, and they all had hot takes, and their hot takes were all stupid. The only thing you can say about it is they should have edited it a little tighter.
I accidentally saw the Batman like opening day.
How
does one accidentally see? So we got back from Hawaii. We went to Hawaii over the week my kids get off in February.
This is why you can't tax the rich.
You can't tax the rich, or they won't go to Kauai over President's Day,
right.
and stimulate the local economy. Think of all the mahi tacos that would have got unpurchased. And
Do you buy Lay's at the airport? Do you get Lay's for everybody?
I thought you meant the potato chips.
Everybody. Oh, my daughter said the other day, she was like, we never get Lay's. And I like Lay's.
How does she even know that? Oh, you thought.
Somebody has given her a potato chip. And I said, darling, everyone likes Lay's.
Lay's are replacement level potato chips.
There's no, that's not news, but we don't get them because I don't like potatoes.
At Hawaii airports, you do not see mainlanders getting Lay's lifted onto their shoulders anymore like you did in 1970.
It used to be for
the airlines used to give them, right?
Yeah, for futurelings that didn't go to Hawaii in the mid 70s. You used to get off the plane, and it was you would always walk down the ladder because there weren't jetways, and they would put a Lay on every single person that got off the airplane. Oh, so nice.
It's like getting to heaven and they give you wings and a harp.
But now you can buy them in the airport. You come down the ladder and you have to go over to a vendor and say, we want this experience.
There should be a vending machine.
Yeah, full of like slightly wilted Lays.
It's got bags of potato chip Lays, and then it's also got neckwear Lays.
So you were there.
We got back from Hawaii, and my son, who did not go with us because he had a different spring break and he actually bailed on the trip. He's like, I'm going to go to Portland with my friends. And
he's a grown man now.
And then he didn't.
He can make his own decisions.
He talks like this.
It's like, Mom, do my laundry, but I'm not going on this vacation.
He was like, when are we going to the Batman? You want to go to the Batman? And I was like, sure. I love a good Batman reboot every 2 years or whatever.
Right.
And so I get out my phone to try to see. I've got like I've got the monthly pass app. So I just see every movie.
Oh, I heard about this monthly pass app.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I heard that it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, you break even at like 2 movies. So if you happen to go, like hypothetically, to 5 to 8 movies a month, like I'm not saying I don't.
Say for instance,
you're basically printing money. You can't afford not to do it, John.
Okay.
And I look at my phone and I'm like, well, let's see, when can we go? I'm recording Omnibus Wednesday. Let's go Thursday. So I think it was. Were we not recording that week? I think I looked at Thursday. So we open up Thursday and I'm like, oh, there's no matinee shows. Oh, there are, but they start at 3. So we booked we found a 3:00 in a Dolby Atmos theater where there were like 2 seats in the back. They weren't together, but we're like, we can make that one guy move. Because we were surprised to see it was all sold out. But I remember that happened with Spider-Man as well. All the IMAX and Dolby screenings sold out to the nerds. So we show up at this theater, we watch the Batman, and it's only like a week later, or later that weekend, I start seeing reviews, and I'm like, wait, did that movie just come out? And I found out we had accidentally gone to the first screening on Thursday afternoon, like the early weekend screenings.
Were there people dressed as the Batman?
That would have given it away.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Maybe we got there during the trailers. Nicole Kidman was already talking. So
I was 25 minutes late to the movie and the trailers were still.
That's the beautiful thing about reserved seating is you can show up 1 second before and get the seat you want, but you might have to yell at somebody. The theater experience, I think if you're our age, it's pretty foundational and you don't understand how people would not like it. But I have friends 10 years younger than me that just watch everything on a little tiny iPhone in 20-minute increments while their kid is napping. And they think of themselves as
cinemaphiles.
As cinemaphiles, yeah.
Do you remember the first thing you watched on an iPad? Or no, not an iPad, what was the thing called? It's the phone size, except it wasn't a phone.
On an iPod?
iPod.
I never had an iPod that had a screen. Like I had an iPhone first.
I was given an iPod as a gift by a rock band that I was touring with in Europe. And it was like a tour gift because they were very rich and we were not. And they were like, you know what? We should get those guys a gift. And
I didn't know that was a thing.
They bought it. Well, it's not. You just have to be like a very classy rock band. And I should name them Keen.
Was it Keen?
The Keen band bought us all what at the time were brand new iPods that had screens.
Do you feel like this is helpful to the listener that if they go on tour with Keen, maybe they can get an iPod?
If you go on tour with Keen and they don't give you expensive gifts, there's something wrong with your band. They regret having invited you on tour. Anyway, I remember the first time my bass player, Eric, said, here, watch this TV show or movie or whatever. And he had downloaded a movie to this thing. I never used it. I ended up giving it to somebody. But he handed me this movie and I tried to watch it on this little thing. Now I do it all the time. But at the time, my brain couldn't fathom it. Like it was a full film that I was watching on a thing the size of a pack of cigarettes. And I remember my eyes and head couldn't get around it. And it made me kind of seasick. And
I think it might be processed different neurally by the brain.
yeah. Well, yeah, right.
It's not just a mood or a vibe. Like it really is hitting different.
I felt like
young people say.
I felt like a caveman who was being shown like an IMAX movie of the universe.
Are you like a dog, kind of like you're barking at the at the people walking across the little rectangle?
Yeah, I would exactly.
How'd they get them in there? How do they get out?
Like I'm following the motion, but I'm not.
You're actually the tribal guy getting shown by the anthropologist, and you're like, how did you get them in here? How is Christian Bale going to get out of this little box?
Exactly. I went around behind it to see where are they? So I didn't, it took me a long time. It was until the iPhone was ubiquitous and I had watched enough YouTube videos of people, slipping and falling downstairs that now I can watch
I still can't, like, for short videos, sure.
No. I can't watch a long thing,
but
but short videos, and I'm saying that it doesn't confuse my mind anymore.
You understand how it works. But if I'm even if I'm on a plane, the guy next to me will be watching a new episode of Euphoria on his phone or something, and I will just be like, no, I gotta get out my laptop.
But you can watch it on a laptop.
Yeah.
Because that's the size of an old TV.
That's the size of the TV we had. The aspect ratio is wrong, and there's no little dials to turn. But I actually have little fake dials I Velcro to the side of my laptop, and I feel more comfortable that way. I mean, even far distant listeners may be aware of the coronavirus pandemic of recent years.
Yeah.
And that was really hard on theaters because that was all the impetus studios needed to be like, guess what? We now have direct distribution via our streaming deals. Let's just screw over movie theaters because they're closed and can't complain. Let's just put Dune on HBO Max instead of in theaters. And what are you going to do, theaters?
I can't imagine watching Dune, for instance, on a computer
on an iPhone?
Or at home even, on a big TV at home, because seeing Dune in the theater is like super immersive. It's exciting. It's a thing. Whereas watching it on TV, you're like, Game of Thrones is hours and hours and hours of this.
Something about the effort of going out changes the movie. And I feel like movie theater chains never capitalize on this. They're always just like, glowing images on a silver screen. Heartbreak feels good in a place like this. But nobody ever says, you actually put on pants and therefore you're invested in this. It became a little event in your little week. And that's really all theaters are selling.
You put on your pillbox hat and your white gloves. And they have big searchlights out front. Oh,
everybody's excited to see
Pillow
Talk with Doris. Yeah, I do not remember the searchlights.
You don't remember searchlights? Oh, because you were in Asia.
Well, I remember seeing them in like 50s premieres.
No.
Where were you?
In the 1970s, you'd be driving around, just a normal life, and you'd see searchlights.
I always thought they were car lots. You're saying movie theaters still had them?
Oh, yeah. And
I'd see them sometimes in the night sky.
Yeah. And that's why you would follow the searchlights, because it wasn't car lots. It was often something cool.
You had to be Batman to go to a movie.
Exactly. But no,
or the opening of an
They
arcade.
had those systems where it was like 4 searchlights all through the sky. And I remember a few times my mom would say, let's go see what it is. And we'd
My city needs me.
We'd drive over to the U District or whatever. And it would be like a movie premiere or something, some actual event that we would park and get out.
We would use the Goodyear blimp for that.
Yeah.
A thing that millennials will not understand. You had to wait for a giant lighter than air dirigible to appear in the sky. And then you would know a really good college football game was happening or something.
But yeah, I'm just old enough to have gone to the big theaters downtown before they were divided into 5 theaters.
Me too.
Because
that was the biggest screen.
Yeah.
If you wanted to see Empire Strikes Back on a big screen, you would go to downtown USA.
Well, yeah, and it was a 2,000 seat theater that had fallen into disrepair, and a lot of those got torn down. They
didn't have video games in the lobby. They couldn't compete with the malls and the burbs.
Well, now the one of the nicest ones, the one that I used to see all the James Bond movies in, is a Banana Republic now, and then a bunch of them got torn down. Oh God, it makes me mad.
The theaters are really struggling today because you can stay home and watch 1,000 things. They were doing fine in an age when you can stay home and watch Get Smart or Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, but it's hard to compete. And literally almost everything now is available at home, although some might cost $2.99. So hard for a theater to compete with that. And over the same amount, or roughly the same stretch of time, it probably corresponds with the theater experience changing to actually changing the form, changing the content. You know, like the things that'll make it in theaters now are the things that people still feel will be noticeably worse at home on a flat screen TV. So everything's a franchise.
Usually something with big explosions.
Everything's got to be, everything's big. Everything's kind of, and partly because it's got to be guaranteed. You know, nobody's taking a $150 million flyer on new IP anymore. It's got to be, even if it's a new movie, it's going to have to be the G.I. Joe movie or some IP that your audience will realize, because that's what marketing has said they want.
You don't need a rom-com because you can watch it at home in your underwear, and
that's what's happening. Genres are just disappearing from theaters because it turns out they're just fine for home viewers.
And direct to video is no longer a ding on something. I mean, it used to be direct to video meant this is terrible.
I mean, maybe prestige or awards wise, but that's a shrinking influence as well. And it doesn't matter, you know, Bird Box might be terrible, but if 100 million people watched the new Netflix thing just because Netflix put it on the home screen and it had a star, guess what? That's a hit. And in the recent year or two after the pandemic, you know, studios have tried to go back to putting kind of middle-brow, quality adult entertainment in theaters. You know, can't miss Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg and Guillermo del Toro movies, and they all just tanked.
Right.
Nightmare Alley, West Side Story, Last Duel. These are all good, in some cases, great movies. Dozens of Oscar nominations, and nobody went because.
How about that Jennifer Lopez?
Marry Me?
Yeah, Marry Me. Did that do well in theaters?
Marry Me so much.
Did you? Oh, you went to see it?
No, Maria Semple texted me opening night to be like, "We have to see Marry Me. Come right now." And I was like, "No, I'm good."
Oh, really?
We have a thing. Because I had told her I was crazy about the trailer, which is insane.
Yeah.
Marry Me was no.
Broke even?
I mean, $20 million. That's probably what they paid Jennifer Lopez.
Right. I support J-Lo and everything she does.
As recently as I think 2009, you look at the top 10 movies of the year, and there's a few things where it's like, I mean, it's not like 1979 where Kramer versus Kramer literally made every cent in America, more than any Bond movie or Spielberg movie.
It's exactly the reference it was right on the tip of my tongue. Like, well, remember Kramer versus Kramer, that jazz.
If you look at those years, it literally is, whatever the best picture winner is, right. Cabaret or The French Connection or whatever will literally make more money than all movies put together today.
It's so funny because so many of those movies were such a drag.
It's been a huge change. But as recently as 2009, you look at the list and it'll have The Blind Side or Meet the Parents or just, the kind of replacement filler grown-up movie that we would all go to. And now almost doesn't exist and almost certainly will not exist no matter when you're listening to this.
For somebody our age, to go back and look at those lists, like top movies of 1976 or best, like the Hot 100 for 1965.
Sometimes it's funny because it's just forgotten stuff.
But also it's you're just reminded of like, no, oh wow, oh right. That came out,
yeah.
Oh man.
If it's your lifetime, you remember everything.
Yeah.
If it's 10 years earlier, you'd be like, the Aristocats made the equivalent of $300 million or something like that,
Yeah.
And it's super true in publishing. You look at the bestseller lists, and it is not what eventually got in the canon.
Yeah, right.
It's all the books you see at Airbnbs and thrift stores. It's all Thornbirds.
Yeah.
Or there's no institutional memory of these Barbara Taylor Bradford books.
That's the crazy stuff, to see which movies made the most money in a year.
Yeah.
Because they often will go into the next year. And it's like, oh, this movie came out in November right. of 1984, but...
Well, that's part of our story. Movies used to roll out slower.
Right.
And the change to the thing where we have today where you look at a top 10 and it's entirely the third movie in a Harry Potter spinoff, followed by the fourth movie in a Avengers spinoff, followed by the second movie in a Twilight. It's just...
You can guess how I feel about this.
Franchise after franchise.
Yeah.
And some of these movies are just fine, and some are not.
They're all basically TV shows that should have been TV shows. And now after Mandalorian, probably going forward will be TV shows, right?
Yeah, I mean, now that TV Star Wars is better than theatrical Star Wars. So far, TV Marvel is not better than theater Marvel, but that'll be the death knell right there.
Yeah, exactly.
In a weird way, the story of how this all changed, how movies went from Kramer versus Kramer and 2001 being the biggest movies in America to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Mr. Grindelwald, #6, being the biggest movie in America.
I'm guessing you've watched 2001 recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Within the last year. I think we talked about you showing your kid 2001, right?
Tried to.
Tried to. That's a movie where you just can't believe, the monkey part is 45 minutes, but to me, that's the selling point of that movie. Like, what is happening here?
I still want to just watch the inside of that space station, just watch people out for a jog.
I think it's because at this point in my life, I've seen so many movies. I don't even care anymore if the movie's good or bad. I just want to say, like, what is even happening?
We did watch the Disney super film, The Black Hole, and my daughter stuck it out.
I haven't seen it since it came out.
Well, I hadn't either.
Does it hold up? Whatever that means.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it does. I mean, it doesn't have a good reputation as a film, but I'd say it holds up.
Black Hole was Disney's attempt to cash in on Star Wars. And
it's way darker.
When Star Wars came out, it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right? Maximilian Schell's like Captain Nemo type.
Yeah.
Movies were very different in 1977. When Star Wars came out, they were just beginning a new era. Jaws had come out in 1975, and that's usually heralded as the beginning of what we now see every time you go to a theater today, the blockbuster era. Yeah. Every movie seemingly kind of engineered to be a big, stereotypically dumb mass audience hit.
Right.
And Jaws is not there's no better made movie than Jaws. But there is something to the Peter Biskind critique that Jaws is not about anything the way that the other big hit movies of that time, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Dog Day Afternoon or Godfather 2, are clearly about people and society.
Isn't Jaws about the romance between Robert Shaw and
the shark?
Not the shark.
Robert Shaw wants to F the shark, and we all know it. That's what he's thinking about the whole time the USS Independence is sinking.
It's a revenge F, too. Hate F.
Sorry, you think it's between the relationship between
Robert Shaw and
the cop Scheider?
No, the guy from Goodbye Girl.
Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss.
I think the Biskind take on that is that Shaw represents conservative America. He dies.
Yeah.
Dreyfuss represents young, goofy counterculture America. He's basically impotent. It's up to Roy Scheider, the solid centrist cop authority figure, to actually run the show.
Authority figure who's in love with his wife and just wants to make everybody safe.
And it's a deeply conservative impulse to have like your good-hearted family man police chief be the uncomplicated hero.
Yeah, but he's against the used car salesman mayor, and he just wants people to be able to have a good time on the beach, but he's also concerned with anxiety.
It's basically beach blanket bingo. The moral of that movie is families should be able to have a good time at the beach.
Yeah.
That's Spielberg's bold take on Jaws.
If you can afford to get to Nantucket. Oh, no, I guess it was Martha's Vineyard, right?
It's a fake version of Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, it's Amity Island. That's why you can't tax the rich. They can't take that ferry to Amity.
Exactly.
No, see, in 75, it was a different time. Those were actual middle-class Americans.
Yeah, right. And it was never, Martha's Vineyard was never Nantucket, let's be honest.
This is, I've never kind of bought that whole, the beginning of the blockbuster era was
Jaws
was doom. Because
I see.
But I gotta say, I watched Raiders the other night for the first time in, I don't know, 5 to 10, whenever my kids saw it 5 to 10 years ago. Because we found a critics poll online, a recent critics poll, 200, 300 people, best movies of the 80s. And I was like, this is perfect. We're going to do these in order. Do the Right Thing, Blue Velvet, Raging Bull, The Shining. And we finally got to Raiders last night. It's funny, like 5 of the top 6 were badly reviewed in their time.
It's just you and Mindy, right? You're not showing The Shining to your kids.
There's no club here.
Okay.
We have no friends. We just watch a movie at night, and
right.
We're always like, what do we watch? So we like to have some structure.
And Raiders, first of all, he climbs on that submarine
How does he do that?
And then
They don't submerge?
hours later, I mean, I guess that's the
He's
thing.
dripping later when he's dripping wet when he emerges later at the base.
Yeah, the plot, I guess. I mean, either he climbed up in the conning tower and had a great trip.
Is he just lashed to the conning tower with a whip and they never fully submerged?
The thing is, if the sub didn't submerge, then they'd open the conning tower and they'd drive it from up there.
Oh,
Right?
that's true.
Yeah, they wouldn't be looking out through a periscope. They'd be up driving it. So that part, I feel like, strains credulity. Now, the face
rest of
melting and the Ark of the Covenant, I believe.
I was deeply, having not seen it for a while, because, if you've seen a movie 100 times, you really can't see it with new eyes. But this time I kind of was, and I was thinking, this really is a movie about nothing. It's a big Shaggy Dog story. It's a Rube Goldberg, it's full of little Rube Goldberg machines where,
Right.
Somebody lights a fire and the fire heads toward Indy and Marion has to hand him a bottle and he clonks the guy and moves just in, it's full of this kind of joy of cinema.
Yeah.
Kind
Airplane
of
is
incident.
slowly moving around and somebody's going to get
That propeller's coming.
dropped,
Like
yeah.
it's all beautifully choreographed, but it's like a Jackie Chan or a Buster Keaton movie.
Right.
Like there's really no underpinnings to that movie at all. This is a movie where the hero at the end learns the Judeo-Christian God is real and still performing miracles
And yet,
in a time of war, and yet he has nothing to say or think about that.
yeah.
He just goes on a date with his girl in Washington, D.C.
I always wondered about that. Like, if this really, that is a world-ending bit of knowledge.
Think of the existential crisis you would get if you actually saw Yahweh kill 100 Nazis.
But that movie is
Indy's
sold.
untroubled. He's just happy the rope's burned.
It works because everyone is so charming, right? Like you would watch Harrison Ford open a jar of tomatoes when he's 35 years old, and everybody else is chewing up the scenery, right? There's no dead air. And now, I watched one of those Spideyverse movies that was kind of it just felt like an Archie comic book, and no one was interesting. There wasn't a person on the screen that I felt like, I'll watch you, except for Marissa Tomei. And I would watch Marissa Tomei just stare at a jar of tomatoes.
That's how we know it's generational. The person on the screen that was of your time, you're like, this is the style that makes me think of a movie star. Whereas my kids are like, Zendaya is so good in that movie. They're just looking for something else.
Yeah, I guess, but I just feel like everybody else is in an episode of The OC. and I don't know, there was something about those Spielberg movies where though they did feel so much larger than life. But you're right, I was 12 years old.
They're just about the craft. Like, you watch a movie today and you're still like, there's like nobody, there's three people today who could make this movie, and one of them is still Spielberg, like, because like the degree of difficulty in almost every scene is insane, and he's doing it all with hardly any tricks.
Yeah, it feels like a movie when the most dangerous thing in it is a paper mache rock is so different than a movie where it's almost commonplace that there's a 10-story tall monster made out of flame that came from an alternate universe.
The movie's got to end with 5,000 computer-generated somethings flying across the screen at all times. Yeah. So we sound like cranky old people, but
it's not the first time.
But even Raiders, which today seems kind of sweet and sedate, if you watch it through a modern, comparing it to the other movies of the time, you're like, something has happened. And now in Reagan's America, this kind of empty escapist thing is what we all want.
Right. Although, what happens in Deer Hunter exactly? There's an hour and a half long wedding.
The wedding? Yeah, it starts with the wedding. Today, people just fast forward the wedding. I guess.
No, you got to watch the whole thing.
When are they going to start playing Russian roulette? Weirdly, the story of how that change happened, how we got to this world of kind of big, uncomplicated, audience-pleasing movies at all costs.
We're 32 minutes into this episode, by the way.
Then let's say Billy Jack. Billy Jack. It's less an artistic thing than actually a financial change that led to this. Oh. And it's all Billy Jack's fault.
Huh? Say what?
Billy Jack is a kind of an independent 1970s movie that there might not be that much cultural memory left of right now.
It's not blaxploitation, it's Indian exploitation?
Yeah, a white writer, director, actor plays a half Navajo, ex-Green Beret, Hapkido expert, mystery man maverick type.
Steven Seagal.
I was going to say Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's high kicking things. So yeah, Steven Seagal in a hat. Weirdly, Billy Jack does not first appear in the 1971 movie Billy Jack, where you would think he first appears. He first appears in a 1967 motorcycle movie called The Born Losers. Now, the mid-'60s were a boom time for motorcycle club movies.
It was a boom time for real motorcycle clubs.
That's the thing that happened. Hell's Angels is a post-war development, 1948 California, named kind of in honor of the kind of glamorous names that American service members would give their squadrons.
Sure, fighter pilots and bombers.
Exactly. Hell's Angels does not have an apostrophe. And to this day, if you go to their website, they will say, maybe you're worried about the apostrophe, but we're not.
Is that they're worried about whether or not you're worried about it?
Well, no, they tell you they're not worried about it.
I see. Well, that seems like protesting too much.
Yeah. Basically, you guys forgot the apostrophe and it's time to own up. Don't pretend it's like you're too cool for an apostrophe. But between, Marlon Brando's The Wild One kind of brought the idea of scary delinquents on motorcycles to suburban America in the mid-'50s. But this boom happened actually in the mid-'60s, probably because of Hunter S. Thompson's book, where he spent some time he spent some time in a motorcycle club. And that led to Peter Fonda's 1966 movie Wild Angels, which was a Roger Corman movie, the famous low-budget producer who would make a movie in a matter of days for, days instead of months for $100,000 instead of $1 million. And these were all enormously profitable. And he's still alive, by the way. Corbin's 96, or
really?
He will turn 96 next month as we record this. And he's a legend because, he would get young writers and directors to make these movies. And so you would not have Francis Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Jonathan Demme, John Sayles, Ron Howard.
What, they all started making motorcycle movies?
They all started making low-budget movies of one kind or another.
Right.
For Roger Corman. He had hits at the time with he was making movies in a lot of different genres. He would take public domain Edgar Allan Poe things and make low-budget Universal style horror movies out of them, and they would make tons and tons of money for almost no
just post Hays Code, so it's okay to show really like ripped bodices again.
Yes, you can have gore, and in some of these movies, boobs. Speaking of which, Russ Meyer, I think, made an early motorcycle movie. It's always the low budget, the independent guys who are willing to take a risk on the faddish new thing. Roger Corman gets a young Peter Bogdanovich, of all people, to write a motorcycle movie. Yeah. And to this day, I think Bogdanovich doesn't get credit on Wild Angels, but he says he wrote 80% of it. Peter Fonda as a motorcycle guy. In 1967, Fonda again makes Glory Stompers, another, it's such a hit that everybody starts rushing motorcycle movies into production. Jack Nicholson stars in Hell's Angels on Wheels. And of course, Fonda and Nicholson then co-star in Easy Rider in, 69?
The greatest movie let's talk about movies that go nowhere and make no sense. The third act of that movie is like, say what now?
That's kind of a thing like Raiders where if the characters actually do nothing, the movie ends about the same. But between Easy Rider and Bonnie and Clyde, kind of fairly low budget movies with young pre-stars that had been handed to, young auteur directors, all influenced by the French New Wave and the idea that the director could be an artist freed from the Hollywood studio system. The Hollywood studio system, directors were craftsmen. Somebody like Fred Zinnemann or Michael Curtiz would make a war movie, and then 3 months later they'd be working on a musical, and then 3 months later a prestige biopic, and then 3 months later a Western. And the French changed all that. They said, no, if you're a really good director, you've got a personal touch and you've got themes you return to. And
this was really a peak era where the French were culturally prominent.
Just by virtue of them being French. And I think we liked it over here because they would pick out examples from our lowbrow pop culture and say,
right,
no, actually.
Right, postmodern articles
actually
about
Stagecoach is art, and and Coke bottles are art. And when Easy Rider and Bonnie and Clyde and movies like that were mega hits, it just reinvented Hollywood. Suddenly the studios were like, this is what we'll do. We'll give these young Turks tons of money to make these counterculture movies,
Right.
and everybody will love them, and you can make whatever you want, and that's how you get, again, Coppola and Scorsese and Lucas and that generation of filmmaker. Star Wars is a crazy new Hollywood movie.
It is crazy.
He just starts in medias res with a 30s style catching you up crawl, and then you just follow some robots for 30 minutes, and then the hero appears. And
I have to think about Star Wars a lot because my daughter thinks about nothing else but Star Wars.
yeah,
But you really do have to admit, like, wow, it's quite an accomplishment. I'm going to come out and give Star Wars a good review.
after all these years, you're finally ready.
Yep, I've come around.
Do you want to give it 2 thumbs up?
2
way up?
thumbs up.
The motorcycle boom is a boon for one Tom Laughlin, the titular Billy Jack. He's the actor, director, writer, auteur of the Billy Jack oeuvre. Born in 1931 in Wisconsin, goes on to play football for the University of Wisconsin and later Marquette. But right about that age, he sees something that changes his life. Just like so many young creative people at that time, he goes to a production of Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh,
And I'm sure it's not Brando on Broadway, but he sees kind of, he has an experience with the theater. He sees what acting can be. He sees what drama can be, It's not your grandpa's Shakespeare or even Ibsen. It's gritty and it's contemporary, and the actors scratch their armpits.
And they mumble.
They mumble so much.
Famously mumble.
And so when he transfers to the University of South Dakota, he studies acting and directing and radio, whatever their major is at the University of South Dakota.
Famous.
That's where you
University
go.
of South Dakota, famous.
That's where you go for radio and
acting
TV.
program.
He meets a young girl there named Dolores, and they're soon married. She's interested in Native American issues. She, having grown up in South Dakota, she's familiar with tribal people, knows Native people, knows how badly they've been treated, and she's kind of a firebrand on.
And this is pre-American Indian movement.
Yeah.
Which is about the same age as me.
It's in the wings. The American Indian movement is about to catch the notice of, Marlon Brando of Hollywood, and it's about to become a cause célèbre.
Wounded Knee is on the horizon.
But right now he's just got a girlfriend who is, feels awful for what the Indian kids in her high school were going through, and
and he's in South Dakota,
he's surrounded by it. So he becomes very interested, and he, with this newfound burst of creativity, he writes a script called Billy Jack, about a half Navajo guy who's just kind of a cowboy and cowboy boots and kicks butt, and he can't get this movie made, so he heads with his brand spanking newly minted South Dakota acting and directing, radio and TV major. He heads out to Hollywood and he
kicks down the doors.
He's a good looking guy. He's a matinee idol looking. He's got one of these faces they don't have anymore with kind of a wide, it's perfect for CinemaScope, kind of a wide face with wide dark eyebrows and a big mouth, kind of a William Devane or Robert Blake. I mean, Warren Beatty's kind of the version of this you can take home to mom.
But he does look like, Robert Blake, where he's got
Robert Urich.
He's got dimples that frame his mouth, and then he always looks like he's bathed in perspiration, but not in a sweaty way.
The mouth is a mile wide, and turned up in a thoughtful way. Hollywood has room for guys who look like that. He plays one of the surfers in Gidget, and he plays one of the CBs in Josh Logan's South Pacific.
He's a guy in the background on a PT boat.
Yeah, good looking guy on a PT boat. But his movie career starts to dry up. And in 1961, having never been able to interest anyone in his script, Billy Jack, or any of the projects he really likes, he's exhausted with the industry. And he and his wife start a Montessori preschool in Santa Monica, which ahead of the curve in 1961 becomes the biggest Montessori school in America.
Wow.
He spends 5 years
making wood blocks.
Yeah, exactly. Teaching kids to touch natural fibers or whatever. That's Waldorf. Whatever they do at Montessori schools. You would know.
Yeah, it's the same thing. That all the toys are made of wood.
But in 1967, American International Pictures, the big independent movie production company, can't compete with MGM or Warner Brothers and Paramount, but they make successful movies because they make hit Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. They make the Beach Blanket Bingo movie. They make all the kind of slightly indie youth movies of the time. They want to make another motorcycle movie, and the now retired early retired Laughlin sees his opening. I think his preschool has gone under, and he thinks, this is how I'll get Bill. He tells American Independent Pictures, I'll make your motorcycle movie. I'll put in this character named Billy Jack, and they agree to give him $400,000 to make a movie, I think based on a Hell's Angels thing. White America was terrified of motorcycle gangs, and with some reason. I mean, this was based on a real case where 4 women had been raped in Monterey or something by a bad outlaw motorcycle club. And he, makes kind of an early revenge picture based on the fears of white America, which would power a lot of cinema in the 70s, Charles Bronson.
And this is right at the kind of trough between 50s Westerns that were super credulous and 70s Westerns or late 60s Westerns that were really ironic.
And you had to kind of decide then, who is this for? Am I making the Green Berets, or am I making something for actual young people?
Right. Dirty Harry was the big one, right? Of this style.
Yeah, exactly. It's just before Dirty Harry. And in fact, when, by the time he makes his sequel, Billy Jack, in 1971, because, in Born Losers becomes a big hit. On its $400,000 budget, it makes $36 million.
Whoa! 1960s dollars.
Yeah, and Laughlin plays exactly. Laughlin plays the lead, this kind of cowboy boot wearing maverick who emerges from the hills in Central California to protect this town against the evil Hells Angels that are menacing them. And so when he makes his sequel, he finally gets to make his Billy Jack script. He kind of has to straddle this line of like, well, who is this for? Am I a cool young guy who cares about peace and love, or am I defending propertied America against juvenile delinquents? So Billy Jack, if you've ever seen it, really tries to split that atom.
And it's post-American Indian movement, so everybody's aware of Native American issues.
Apparently it's not that problematic for a guy from Wisconsin to play a half Navajo.
Not at the time.
But he's kind of been influenced, I think, by spaghetti westerns. Now he's no longer just a cowboy in boots. He's wearing a black kind of flat brimmed
10-gallon hat,
Eastwood hat with a band that has kind of Navajo designs on it.
Right. That's a hat that can take a guy from Wisconsin and make him look Native American.
It's now shot in Prescott, Arizona, where there's some kind of hippie commune called Freedom College, which is under threat from the mean local townies. I think a rich kid maybe assaults one of the girl hippie, pretty girl at this compound, and his dad is the sheriff or the mayor or something. So the town closes ranks. So the whole movie is like hippies versus townies, and so
breaking away, except in Arizona.
Well, except a mystery man wanders out of the mountains and kicks ass.
What a weird plot.
So Billy, yeah, and I think it is an attempt to kind of, you see it today in Marvel movies where they're like, this is definitely about COVID or Trump or something or immigration, but we can't say that because we don't want to alienate anyone. So, he's defending the young people of the counterculture, but he's doing so just by punching and kicking people.
Yeah, the henchmen, right? He's punching and kicking henchmen.
And the mayor. He kicks the mayor in the head because what has happened is that in the last year, since he wrote the Billy Jack script, Tom Laughlin has discovered martial arts. His dad is in a park. Tom Laughlin's dad is in a park at some point and sees a Korean martial arts expert doing a demonstration of Hapkido, and heretofore unknown in America, Korean martial art. And his dad is like, you got to see this. And Tom Laughlin just becomes fascinated with Hapkido.
And this is also peak Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah. Let's see. When were the first Bruce Lee movies that were released in the U.S.?
He died in 1973.
I know. Enter the Dragon. I mean, all these movies are early 70s, right? Enter the Dragon's late.
I feel like all of his Western movies came out after The Green Hornet. He was on The Green Hornet TV show.
And many posthumously. Enter the Dragon and Game of Death and Game of Death 2 are all
73 and
later.
So
So I think Tom Laughlin, this white guy from Wisconsin, is actually ahead of the curve on martial arts movies here.
Okay.
Just because his dad saw Hapkido in the park.
And he had a natural gift at it.
I don't know. I want to say that,
Yeah,
but
okay.
he studies extensively with Han Bong-soo, this Korean Hapkido master, and becomes he spends 6 months training on martial arts for the first time in his life.
And he's a black belt and the greatest martial artist in the world.
He's plausible in the movie. I think Master Han actually doubles for Tom Laughlin quite a bit if anything difficult has to happen.
Oh,
But he's plausible for kind of
he can kick above his head.
a big barrel-chested white guy in this movie. So there's, the famous scene is him just telling the mayor he's going to kick him in the head and then kicking the mayor in the head.
Kick you in the head and I kick you in the head.
That's kind of the movie this is. Now this movie, when Billy Jack comes out in 1971, this is the thing that changes Hollywood again. New Hollywood is off and running with these young auteurs, Last Picture Show, and whatever else the movies of the early 70s are. But
Show Last Picture Show to your 10-year-old. I dare you.
I think the Sybil Shepherd scenes probably aged pretty well for a
strong female lead.
I don't know if I'd say that. Billy Jack changes Hollywood after its release because at first it does not make any money. Since up until the late 1940s, Hollywood movies were released using what is called block booking. The movie theaters, the big studios, all owned a theater chain.
Right.
Which means
Paramount, Lowe's.
Which means they had all the muscle. So they could just tell the ones they owned, in their verticals and everybody else, here are the movies that are coming out. You get these and nothing else, and you have to show them. And that was great because they could kneecap independents, newcomers without actually, it didn't matter if the movies were good or bad. They didn't have to advertise.
Oh.
You would see what was coming to your town, and that was what the studio had decided to make for you.
You'd literally see it on the marquee.
Yeah. I mean, and the movies, that's why there's a Paramount theater in a lot of cities, because Paramount Pictures owned a chain of Paramount theaters. Until 1940, this was all the brainchild of Adolf Zukor, one of the founders of Paramount, who had come up with this whole idea. And the studios loved it. It didn't matter if the movie was good or bad. It was going to play for so many weeks in so many towns, guaranteed. And then in 1948, the government came knocking.
There was an antitrust thing?
Truman's antitrust DOJ in the Supreme Court case of United States versus Paramount Pictures decided that essentially block booking was unconstitutional, that the studios could not own theater chains.
Oh, vertical integration.
The government busted a vertical.
Six Sigma black belt.
So from 1948 until Billy Jack's release, until the early 70s, movie studios relied on what was called platform distribution, which was kind of a phased rollout of movies. You'd only have to strike a few prints of a movie. You could show it in
New York and San Francisco.
You'd show it in big urban centers, and this would develop word of mouth because there's still there's big local and national print medias and radio networks. So you'll get critics to talk about these movies, and the ones that get buzz, either good or bad, then a couple months later, they're showing in suburbia where, people didn't want to drive an hour into the city to see the movie, but they've been hearing about it.
Right.
So if you look at movie ads from this time, it's all like, some loved it, some hated it. You can't miss it. Come see Oliver, or whatever it is.
You remember
From Here to Eternity.
When movies debuted in New York and then it took weeks to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was annoying. But movie theaters loved it because it would just build anticipation.
Right.
They don't have to worry about a bunch of competition because, again, no home video, no streaming, 3 TV channels. And from suburbia, it would move on to even, more and more remote and places and smaller theaters. And this would be a process that would last months or more likely years. Movies would kind of move outward from New York and LA and then Chicago for a year or two.
Eventually they would come to Alaska.
Is that what do you remember this?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You'd go to movies months later.
Alaska was not where they were debuting movies. And
I mean, it kind of got reinvented by Weinstein's Miramax in the 90s, that you could leverage the same thing. You open it up, this would happen to indie movies because it was much cheaper. You'd open it up in New York and LA. Siskel and Ebert would love it. And then you'd have some grounds to do a wider release because you've got a built-in audience.
But a lot of movies died on the vine. Debuted in New York. Nobody went to see it, and they didn't get a wide release.
Some would die on the vine. Yeah, I mean, you could leverage bad reviews. You could say, like, because often this, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There would still be these contrarian reviews from Pauline Kael or David Denby just dicing up an audience pleasing movie or whatever, and they would say in the ads, come see for yourself the movie that everyone's angry about.
Right.
But studios loved this again because all the advertising was basically free. They could still strike a small number of prints, and they never had to run a publicity campaign because they would have movie critics doing it for them,
Right.
And basically this is a time when everything is moderately profitable because you'll still come see the new movies through town, and movies are cheap.
Right. They don't take $100 million to do.
A big production like Chinatown in 1973 cost $3 million.
Wow. But think about all the special effects in Chinatown.
That was the thing. Movies didn't have that. Movies would have 8 or 9 effect shots, even if they were some kind of elaborate genre piece, because every movie cost a few $1 million, which meant executives were fine. They could sit pretty and enjoy their sweet LA lifestyle. But then a couple things happened at the same time, like cocaine happened.
Hello.
So you've got a new breed of movie exec, a new, more type A kind of thinking in Hollywood. A lot of the studios got bought or merged with a bigger business with a New York presence, and so suddenly you've got money guys in New York.
Oh boy,
who are asking for box office returns every week. Huge bummer. Alan Ladd Jr. could just be like, yeah, sure. We'll give Mike Nichols $1 million to make whatever, and it'll probably make 1.2 million. Perfect. And that all changes. And really the thing that changed it is Billy Jack. When Tom Laughlin signed his deal with Warner Brothers to distribute Billy Jack, he had gotten a clause that would give him control and veto rights over how the movie was, publicity campaigns, advertising, the release strategy for the movie. Because of
his hit in the 60s.
Yeah, because Born Losers, the previous Billy Jack movie, had made
a lot.
100 times its budget, basically. Am I doing that right? Yeah, that's right. 100 times its budget. So he could negotiate this kind of thing. And again, in New Hollywood, the studios are willing to give these young guys money because you might get an Easy Rider sized hit. Who knows? But then Warner Brothers just screws them. They renege on the deal. They put it out in 12 theaters. They don't have any ads. No advertising whatsoever. And the movie tanks. It turns out it's a few years later, and 6 years later, or 4 years later, nobody wants to see a Billy Jack spinoff.
Doesn't seem like Pauline Kael's going to give it a good review either.
It's not the kind of thing that critics are going to rally around. So it's not ideal for this kind of platforming. So Laughlin is like, well, he's like Billy Jack. He's a maverick.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he's not walking around barefoot doing Hapkido kicks, but the equivalent, the LA eccentric equivalent. He flies to Minneapolis, takes $5,000 of his own money, rents a theater, and runs his own local advertising campaign. And the movie does great business in Minneapolis.
Oh.
And he tells Warner Brothers, hey, I've got this thing. Here's how we'll do it. I've got this. And Warner Brothers is like, no, this movie already failed. We're done with Billy Jack. But he's got this contract saying he's got approval over ad campaigns. He lawyers up and he sues Warner Brothers. And in their as part of the settlement to make it go away, because Warner Brothers has screwed this up, they agree that they will do a 1973 re-release. It's 2 years after Billy Jack comes out. They're going to re-release it with a whole new campaign. And this time they're
just to get this guy off their back.
Just to get this guy off their back. They don't have any hopes of Billy Jack actually being a hit in re-release. That would be unprecedented for a little indie movie like this to be a hit. But this time Laughlin has more control over this promotion campaign, and he's got a guy in his distribution company named Max Youngstein, who has extensive experience in watching the release of a lot of low budget movies. Even lower than Roger Corman AIP movies, like just wildlife documentaries, exploitation films. How do you make money releasing stuff like that and competing with Ben-Hur? And they had a thing called four-walling, where the idea is you're just surrounding the average moviegoer with your movie on all four walls. You surround them. You oversaturate the market. You make a bunch of money quick. So word of mouth, no, it's not that word of mouth doesn't power the movie. Word of mouth is irrelevant. You're hoping to circumvent word of mouth because now there's no risk.
It's called impressions.
Yeah.
When we were trying to sell records, they always said, you need 5 different impressions. A record buyer has to see it 5 different times in 5 different places.
Because you won't just see one Rolling Stone review or one Letterman song and go out and buy a record.
But then
you have to get the idea of, you're breeding FOMO. You're giving people the idea they're missing something, right?
If the record's sitting at the end cap in the record store, if there's a review in the local weekly, all that stuff.
So Max Youngstein has seen that if you can surround people like this, the movie will be a hit before anybody discovers it's bad. And he keeps trying to tell Hollywood, this is actually how you do it. This is how you maximize returns on movies. Like these close to the wire places with no margins have had to do this. And you guys could do this too, and you'd up your profits. And Youngstein finally has a chance with Billy Jack. So he says, we adapted every proven principle of distribution and merchandising from General Motors to Coca-Cola, Revlon, all these companies that had figured out impressions, surround the consumer. Because studios weren't interested in this, but every other industry had invented modern advertising by 1973.
Right.
And here, his big innovation was we booked it not into a single theater or 2 theaters or even 20 theaters. In our first week, we booked the picture into over 60 theaters. This was revolution. This is, today you book movies on thousands of screens.
Right.
But this was revolutionary in 1973. No other movie had done that. I think The Godfather had, The Godfather had been on 54 screens the year before. And that was the record for.
Whoa.
Whereas Billy Jack on 61 screens, 4-wall situations all over LA, in its first 6 days, it grossed $900,000. Basically, a Godfather-sized hit.
Whoa.
I have checked my personal experience at Youngstein, every possible company I could find, and my conclusion is this is the highest gross for any picture, either new or old, ever to be released in its first week in Southern California.
Billy Jack.
Billy Jack becomes the biggest first week debut in history.
Wow.
A Godfather-sized hit. And Hollywood cannot help but notice. Like, they've seen what happens. Basically, Hollywood has learned overnight, you just need to surround the customer with the drumbeat of the new movie. And if it's on every screen, they won't have to make an appointment. They don't have to think, honey, let's go down to the Egyptian on Saturday and see the new thing at either 6 or 8. It's really just you show up at a theater and, I guess it's Billy Jack.
Yeah. Right.
Youngstein says, I don't claim that a terrible picture can be made into a winner, but I do say that regardless of how bad it is, with intelligent and imaginative distribution and promotion, it will do a hell of a lot greater business than if you just let it go down the drain. So Hollywood realizes, you can see the writing on the wall. Movies no longer have to be good. Movies no longer have to appeal to critics or even provoke critics. You can just make any old thing. And if you use Coke and GM ad strategies, it's profitable. So Warner Brothers in 1973 has a problem. They've got a movie they spent a ton of money on. It's coming out at Christmas, but it's full of swearing and a little girl who's pleasuring herself with a crucifix.
Oh, dear.
They've got The Exorcist, and they are worried. They think it's not going to make a cent because it's going to be a huge divisive thing. But they see Billy Jack, and they're like, with very little to lose, let's 4-wall The Exorcist. Let's do the 5 impressions thing. No other studio has ever tried to 4-wall a big production like this.
And a horror movie and a Satan movie.
It's the most divisive movie. Like, nobody thinks this is going to be a nationwide conversation tentpole mega hit. There's just no chance. Like, they're trying to avoid a super flop. Let's get this in front of people before they realize what we've made.
Right.
So the movie comes out at Christmas 1973. Pauline Kael hates it. Andrew Sarris hates it. Vincent Canby hates it. At $3 a ticket, The Exorcist makes $160 million.
Wow. I remember when The Exorcist was everywhere, and I wasn't allowed to see it because I was a kid, but it was everywhere.
If I remember right, it was the biggest movie of 1973. So a movie that they were worried about, let's get this niche exploitation-y hit. And that changes Hollywood overnight. Because suddenly the money men in New York see numbers and they think there's no reason to ever make or market a movie a different way. Like, they're just bean counters. Like, this is how you do it. What the week that The Exorcist gross comes in, I guess Warner Brothers executive Dick Lederer walks into the office of a fellow executive, Barry Beckerman, and shows him the numbers. And he said, "Kid, the fun is over. There are guys in New York." This is a count from Sam Wasson's book about the making of Chinatown, which I really enjoyed. "There are guys in New York looking at these figures saying, this is the kind of money you can make in the movie business." Like, they didn't realize. Like, now they're like, wait, for 50 years, you guys have just been dicking around and going to pool parties?
Leaving money on the table. We've been having a good time out here. We've been very successful, but it's going to get real successful after this. Oh, dear.
So 2 years later, Jaws, 4 years later, Star Wars, and now 40 years later, 100%, Grindelwald and Lego-based movies.
Wow.
Every time you go to the theater.
How many Billy Jack movies were there in the end?
Tom Laughlin went on to make, he'd already made Born Losers and Billy Jack. He made The Trial of Billy Jack, which was a hit. And then he made a remake of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where Billy Jack somehow takes over a vacated Senate seat and is appalled by the corruption in our nation's capital.
Sure.
It's the same thing, but he's high kicking the Senate Majority Leader or something.
And then this becomes First Blood, right? This becomes the Vietnam movies of the 80s.
I really don't think you get First Blood and maybe all those Charles Bronson revenge movies, the fear of white suburbia in multiplexes without Billy Jack. But the funny thing is, like, Born Losers gives us new Hollywood. It creates this kind of magical decade of Peter Bogdanovich and being able to make whatever movie he wants. But then Billy Jack accidentally gives us this new way of marketing movies, which leads to profit maximization, which kills off new Hollywood and gives us the blockbuster age of the 80s.
What's interesting is that there still remained a certain amount of artistry in big movies, even goofy ones.
What era are you thinking here?
Through the 80s, through even the 90s. Like, it took a while for movies to become solely a corporate product. And
kind of a Pavlovian, just give them something in their retinas all these TV commercial guys being given movies.
Like, people
the Charlie's Angels guy.
Aiming for a big hit, but there was still room in Hollywood for all these little, teen comedies and arty films and doofy movies that sort of broke even. But I guess it was sort of like the record industry. At that point in time, we were still a very captive audience. And so you could do Adventures in Babysitting, and
there was nothing else to watch.
Yeah, people would go. But it definitely feels like Marvel Studios, more than anything, when they started printing money, it was the final nail in that coffin.
And the movies are kind of well made, like not in a Spielbergian sense, but in the sense that clearly a big group of very smart people has really machined this movie to land in every way it can.
And also,
you don't have a bad time.
Those movies, the actors are also super charismatic. Like, they're cast so well that you just want to watch. You want to watch those people just chew scenery. But now that's just produced the superhero movie, the superhero movie where the actors aren't interesting and the plot isn't interesting and the special effects aren't interesting, but it still is $100 million movie.
There's just not enough movie stars, I think. I've read about indie directors who are whose projects fall apart because every single person they attach to their movie then gets lured away by Marvel a month later with a big paycheck and a franchise.
The good actors, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, because indie movies need one or two genuine stars to get financing, and now they can't get them because Marvel needs every movie star, because in an unprecedented moment in entertainment history, they've got now 100 character universe to water and maintain.
Yeah.
Like Star Wars was never worried about casting a big star as IG-88 or Bosk, but
well, watching the Batman movie, and spoiler alert, when Paul Dano finally appears on the screen as himself, I was like, oh, where have you been? You're great. Like, of course you're the villain in this movie.
I had actually forgotten it was going to be Paul Dano. For some reason, I was like, wait, who is it? Joseph Gordon-Levitt? And then Paul Dano appears, and I was like, right.
I didn't expect it either. And then, of course, you watch Zoe Kravitz look at a jar of tomatoes.
That's a movie star.
Right? So it's still possible. And the guy from Twilight has a gravelly voice, if he wants.
Tom Laughlin tried to bring Billy Jack back in the 80s.
Oh.
Would
have been peak time.
He was halfway through Billy Jack Returns, which would have cashed in on Rambo and what's Bronson's name in all those movies? Whatever those Death Wish movies are.
Yeah.
But I think sadly he took a bottle to the head doing a stunt halfway through shooting.
Oh no.
And it really did a number on him. They had to stop the shoot.
Oh, bummer.
And I think it really kind of stuck with him for the rest of his life. When he died in 2013, the obituaries asked for donations to be given to an Alzheimer's foundation. So I assume he'd been dealing with
he got conked and
dementia of old age for a while before, but there's still half of a Billy Jack movie sitting unreleased because of a stunt gone wrong. But I don't know, like, there's still all these romantic comedies and the movies they don't make anymore. They still exist in abundance on streaming. It's not like people have lost that itch.
But don't you do the thing where you go on streaming and click through? I mean, this is why you made a list of the best movies of the 80s.
Because there's just too much.
I'm just like, nope. And I don't know what's there that I'm noping.
Simultaneously too much and too little.
Yeah, right. I feel like I nope things that are great and I still manage to watch things that are bad.
I mean, honestly, the money right now is probably not in figuring out how to get people to watch movies communally in a public space. That's probably gone. But if any of these streaming services could actually figure out curation in a way that makes sense.
Right. That's what you thought it was going to be, right? That there would be.
This is going to be smarter than going to the multiplex.
Right.
It turns out, no, they all have terrible interfaces and are terrible at showing you what you might actually like, or reminding you of something you missed.
Yeah. Netflix now has 7,000 employees and they can't do anything right.
So, in the future, of course, that's all been solved.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We're speaking, whoever's listening to this has their own entertainment, and it's surely perfectly individualized to their tastes.
Entertainment is like garanimals. Like there's 7 kinds, and you're either a bear, you're a fox, you're a badger. But
if that's true, there's nobody to argue with, like if everybody's seeing just the little mini niches that appeal to them. I mean, even when I don't go to movie theaters, I want to talk to somebody else who has seen the same movie. You wanted to tell me what you thought about the Batman. I wanted to tell you what I thought about the Batman. Like there's something just very hollow and lonely about just seeing the Batman yourself and then wandering back into real life. And that was just 3 hours of Soma, 3 hours gone.
Right. Yeah. But I want to talk to you about the Batman, but I don't want to hear you talk about some Spidey reboot.
I think what happens is you want to talk about the Batman to me, but you don't want to hear me talk about the Batman.
Oh, I love hearing you talk about the Batman.
We need a place where everyone can give opinions with the illusion of an audience, but never have to actually receive them.
Like a place where you could send out a short message,
260 character message,
and then everybody could read it and comment, even though you don't know them or don't care who they are.
I hope somebody comes up with that.
And that concludes Billy Jack, entry 122.LV1933, certificate number 33734 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project. Our handles were at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can hang out with other Futurelings and have a good old time. They're a fun bunch of people at the Futurelings, anywhere that social media allows one to congregate. You can mail us things to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155. Ken, sounds like you're opening the mail.
I just opened a letter right now, which I thought was just a letter, but actually has a little prize. A Mr. Ms. or Mix Rust from Missouri. It looks like maybe Kevin or Carrie. I'm not sure.
Kevin / Carrie Rust.
Kevin and or Carrie. Thank you, sir, madam, or non-binary.
Victor, Victoria.
You need better handwriting so we can read your name. But they sent us. We just heard the entry about the mill, the thousandth of a dollar coin, and sent us an actual Missouri mill. I guess Missouri, for some reason, was minting its own 10th of a cent.
Does it have a date
coins
on it?
This says he says they were minted in the Great Depression, so that sales tax on gas can be paid for fractional cents. Oh, I guess that's what we said in the show.
Oh, I see.
But I don't know if this can't be that old, right? I don't see.
Let me see. Is this a thing where you put a penny into a squeezer and it comes out as a Missouri mill?
Well, it's so discolored, it's even hard to tell what this originally was. Zinc? It's got a map of Missouri with a 1 icon on it because
it does look like zinc.
It's blackened by time now.
Sales tax receipt, it says.
So I guess you would use it to pay for sales tax.
And this is an interesting thing.
This is true. No, that's right. He looked it up, and they are sales tax for a sales tax payment. From the 30s on.
The front and obverse are the same, which is I've never seen a coin like that.
You'd be the worst Batman supervillain ever if you were the mill.
I'm gonna flip this coin and we'll see what happens.
If a map of Missouri comes up, I'm gonna let you go, Batman. Damn it! Happened again.
Please support the show. Your generous contributions allow us to keep fleshing out this bunker down here, which is made of flesh. And
do you think people will donate if they know how much human flesh you decorate with?
That's at patreon.com/omnibus project.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.